Imagine a ship so large it doesn't carry passengers, it carries a small city. Nearly 10,000 people on board at once, 8 neighborhoods, more than 40 restaurants, 7 swimming pools, an entire water park with record-breaking slides, and a park full of living trees, all floating in the middle of the ocean, on a vessel 5 times the size of the Titanic. It sounds impossible. It's real, sailing right now, and it's called the Icon of the Seas. This is the largest cruise ship ever built. Today, we go inside it, how big it truly is, what's hidden on all 20 of its decks, the invisible machine that keeps a floating city alive, and the darker side these giants don't advertise. Because a ship this size hides far more than water slides. Let's start with the sheer, almost unbelievable scale of it, a city that floats. Numbers can be hard to feel, so let's make this one real. The Icon of the Seas is about 1,200 feet long, nearly a quarter of a mile of ship. Stand it on its end, and it would tower over almost every skyscraper on Earth. It's roughly 5 times the size of the Titanic, the ship the entire world once considered impossibly, terrifyingly huge. The Titanic next to this would look like a lifeboat. Put them side by side and the most famous ship in history barely reaches partway up the Icon's hull. To walk from one end of the ship to the other and back is very nearly a mile. Crew members sometimes use bicycles and scooters to cross the lower decks because walking takes too long. It stands 20 decks high and can carry up to around 7,600 passengers, plus a crew of over 2,300 to serve them. That's close to 10,000 people living, sleeping, and eating on a single vessel at the same time, the population of a genuine small town, all afloat. And it weighs in at around 250,000 gross tons. To build it took 7 years and cost roughly $2 billion. When it was formally named, the ceremony was performed by one of the most famous people on the planet. The soccer legend Lionel Messi smashed the bottle against its hull. This isn't just a ship, it's one of the largest moving objects humanity has ever created. And to grasp what that means, consider this. It has to be so wide and so tall that when it was delivered, it had to retract its own funnel just to squeeze under a bridge in Denmark on the way out. It carries a whole town across the sea and makes it look effortless. The 8 hidden neighborhoods. Here's the first thing that surprises people. A ship this enormous can't just be one big boat with cabins. It would feel like an airport terminal. So the designers did something clever. They broke the Icon into 8 distinct neighborhoods, each with its own atmosphere, like districts of a city. And exploring them is like walking through a town that happens to float. There's Central Park, an actual open-air garden in the middle of the ship, filled with over 30,000 real living plants, where you can stroll surrounded by greenery with the ocean somewhere beyond. Standing in it, with trees around you and no water in sight, you can genuinely forget you're on a ship at all. There's the Royal Promenade, the ship's bustling main street, lined with shops, bars, and cafes. There's Surfside, a whole neighborhood built for families with young children. There's a sweet neighborhood for the wealthiest guests, with private pools and restaurants most passengers never even see. There's Chill Island, layered with pools and cabanas, and an adults-only hideaway with a pool that appears to hang over the edge of the ship. And then there's Thrill Island, home to the ship's most jaw-dropping feature. Because on the top of this ocean liner sits Category 6, billed as the largest water park at sea. 6 full-size water slides, including the tallest drop slide ever put on a ship, twisting and weaving through the air hundreds of feet above the waves. Somewhere below your feet, as you plunge down them, is the open Atlantic, hundreds of feet down. There's even a walkway called Crown's Edge that swings you out over the side of the ship, dangling above the water, where the floor beneath you can suddenly drop away. It's the kind of thrill you'd expect at a theme park on land, except here, if you looked down, there's nothing beneath you but ocean. And the food alone tells the story of the scale. There are more than 40 different places to eat and drink on board. Restaurants, food halls, bars, cafes, including the largest swim-up bar ever built on a cruise ship. You could sail for a week and eat somewhere different every single meal and still not see it all. This is what the biggest ship really means. Not just long and tall, but a place so full of hidden worlds that guests get genuinely, happily lost inside it. The invisible city beneath. But here's the part almost no passenger ever thinks about, and it's the real engineering miracle. To keep 10,000 people alive, comfortable, and moving across the ocean, there is an entire second ship hidden beneath the one people see. A vast, invisible machine humming away below the waterline and behind the walls, running 24 hours a day. Think about what a floating city of 10,000 people actually needs. It needs fresh water, so the ship makes its own, pulling in seawater and converting it into hundreds of thousands of gallons of drinking water every single day. It needs power, enough electricity to run a small town, generated by massive engines deep in the hull. It needs to deal with the sewage and garbage of 10,000 people, processed and stored on board around the clock, because you cannot simply dump it in the sea. It needs thousands of tons of food, loaded in port and stored in enormous refrigerated holds. Tens of thousands of eggs, thousands of pounds of meat and produce vanishing into the kitchens every day. It needs tons of food loaded and stored and refrigerated, kitchens working through the night, laundry systems handling mountains of towels and sheets. And it all has to happen silently, invisibly, without a single guest by the pool ever noticing. Below the beautiful decks is a labyrinth most passengers never see. Crew corridors nicknamed the I-95 after the highway, engine control rooms, and the quarters where those 2,000 crew members live and work, keeping the whole illusion running. And then there's the challenge of simply keeping something this enormous stable and moving. A ship this tall and this wide has to resist the roll of the ocean, so it uses stabilizers, huge fins that extend from the hull to steady it against the waves. It's powered by enormous engines running on liquefied natural gas and steered by pods that can rotate to push it in any direction and dock a quarter-mile-long vessel with surprising precision. Every element of that floating amusement park up top depends on this hidden, roaring, invisible city underneath, the part of the biggest ship in the world that no postcard ever shows. The darker side they don't advertise. Now for the part the glossy brochures leave out, because a machine this big casts a big shadow, and an honest look at the largest ship in the world has to include it. Start with the environment. A vessel this size burns an enormous amount of fuel and produces a significant amount of emissions and waste. The Icon was designed to run on liquefied natural gas, which the cruise line promotes as a cleaner burning fuel, and it does burn cleaner than traditional heavy marine oil in some ways. But environmental groups have pushed back hard, warning that natural gas can leak unburned methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere, and arguing that these megaships remain a serious environmental burden no matter what they're fueled with. The sheer scale that makes the ship a marvel also makes its footprint massive. Then there's the human side. That army of over 2,000 crew members keeping Paradise running often works long hours, many months at a time, far from home, living in those hidden lower decks below the guests. And a ship carrying 10,000 people is, statistically, its own small town, which means that, like any town, it isn't immune to accidents, medical emergencies, crime, and even tragedy on board. These are rare against the number of happy voyages, but they're a real reminder that a floating city carries all the complications of a real one. When something goes wrong far out at sea, the nearest hospital can be a day away, so the ship carries its own medical center, its own security, its own systems for handling emergencies, because for the days it's at sea, it is genuinely on its own. None of this is to say the Icon isn't an astonishing achievement. It plainly is. But the fullest answer to what's hidden inside the biggest ship in the world isn't just water slides and restaurants. It's also the fuel, the labor, and the sheer human weight of moving 10,000 lives across the sea. So what is the Icon of the Seas, really? It's a genuine floating city, a quarter-mile of ship, 20 decks tall, 5 times the size of the Titanic, holding 10,000 souls, 8 neighborhoods, a park, a water park, and 40 places to eat, all gliding across the open ocean. On top, it's a fantasy of pools and gardens and slides. Underneath, it's a roaring, invisible machine making its own water and power and keeping that fantasy alive every second. And around it all hangs the honest weight of what a thing this size costs, in fuel, in labor, in impact. And maybe that's the most interesting thing about it. The Icon of the Seas is a mirror of us, of human ambition at its most extreme. We looked at the Titanic, the ship that once symbolized the limit of what we could build and the hubris of thinking we'd beaten the sea, and we said, bigger. 5 times bigger. A ship so large it stopped being a vehicle and became a destination. Whether that's a triumph of engineering or a monument to excess is, honestly, a question worth sitting with, and the answer probably depends on which deck you're standing on. So tell me, would you actually want to sail on something this enormous, a floating city of 10,000 people? Or does it sound like a little too much? And I'm always curious how far these stories travel, so let me know what part of the world you're watching from. The biggest ship ever built is out there right now, crossing the sea with a small city on its back. See you next time.